Hello and welcome to the video. This is a first look and my first impressions of this little model here. Let me just show you what it looks like on the desk. It's hard to kind of see it as it's a little black number. This is the new Rekon 3 from Rekon FPV. Now I'm a fan of the Rekon brand. I have the Rekon 5. This is a daily driver for me. I absolutely love it. It has my Beta FPV SMO camera here at the front, and it just gets flown all the time. In fact, I'm using it at the moment to do a lot of the chase footage for the fixed wing reviews that I do. It's just beautiful, and the way it's put together is fantastic. Also had a look recently at its younger brother, the 4-inch version, the Rekon 4. So guess what? We got the Rekon 3. Now this has been kicking around as a design for a little while. If you follow Dave C on Instagram, you'll have seen him teasing it. And it runs on a single 18650 cell. You snap it into the top and it will give you well over 15 minutes of flight time. But a couple of things I've discovered while I've been playing with it. So stay with me. We'll do some stuff, unboxing, Betaflight, flying and summary settings, and let me go through my thoughts. So while I unbox this, let me go through some of the specs. Now this weighs only 62.5 grams, and with the battery in the back, it's about 111 grams. So this is well under the 250 gram limit. Now you need a specific kind of cell. It says VTC6 kind of 18650 cell, 3000 milliamp hours. I've tried it on the VTC5As. I think I've tried it on as well, and they seem to work okay. But I'd try, if you can, get your hands on the higher end battery. This pulls a reasonable amount of current when it's flying around, and you need a battery that isn't going to sag too much. Now there isn't an awful lot in the box. I think this is kind of a pre-production review unit, so the packaging might be slightly different, but when you take it out, it is incredibly lightweight, and it's a bit of a shock to actually look at this thing and see how well it's constructed. The cute thing is Dave C has actually designed it so that the holder for the battery is a structural part. 3D printed pieces in here to keep it nice and lightweight, little nano camera at the front, all-in-one flight controller in the middle. One of the key things you have to do, and that green thing that you saw, is actually to make sure that you put it the right way round, that you don't put the battery in backwards because I'll blow it up. It's got a PETG body, carbon fiber arms. At the back is a little Zeus Nano VTX 350 milliwatt, so it will go up to 350 milliwatts. I've not been running it anything like that here, but it's capable. I've looked at that VTX previously, and this is one of those that's had the arms snapped off. Inside is a Zeus 5 amp all-in-one F4 based board, and nicely it's got the little plugs on the side so you can plug everything in. There's no soldering if unfortunately you lost a motor. Speaking of motors, these are 1202.5 11600 kV units, spinning 3-inch props. The front is a Cadix Nano Ant FPV camera, and the spec of the propellers, if you're interested, I think they're Gemfan 3018s, and you do get a spare set in the box as well, which is really good. Pulling it apart, you can see all of the cute choices that have been made to fit all of this inside the model. And looking inside, it's more like looking at a big Whoop than it is a little quadcopter. And that's kind of an indication of some of the flying feel that I'll come on to in a minute. But the manufacturing and the way it's put together, just like the other Rekon models that I've looked at, is all very nice. There's only a couple of things that I would recommend that you tweak before you go too much farther. I used a little piece of black insulation tape around the back of the battery bay just to keep the antenna out of the way of the props. It can wander and get caught. Mine has, so I would do that. And there is a little bit of room inside the case for a very small receiver. You're going to have to go for a nano style receiver in order to fit it in here. There's no room for anything else. So let's plug it into Betaflight and have a quick look. Again, I'll do the dump and diff at the bottom. So we'll click on connect, enable expert mode. It's upside down because of the USB port, as you saw, is actually on the bottom. So that's why it looks like that. Ports, not a lot. IRC tramp set for that 350 milliwatt VTX. Configuration is pretty standard, apart from the motor direction is reversed. Be aware of that when you put the props on. D-Shock 600, 8K gyro, 4K PID loop frequency. It's an F4, so it's actually handling that okay with the lower PID loop frequency. S-base receiver, you can get it with lots of different receivers in it. Mine didn't come with one, so I ended up popping one in. Everything else is pretty standard stuff. Power and battery looks like this. It doesn't have an amp meter on it, so you can't have that, unfortunately. And the failsafe is set to drop. PID tuning looks like this. It is a very stable, gentle flyer. Again, dump and diff are down below if you want to have a look at that. The mode setting, by default, only the arm and angle modes are set. And that's actually more what I've been playing it with in angle mode. I'll talk about why in a moment. On-screen display is by default like that. I'd move things around. Interestingly, they have got the current set on there, which again, it has got a current meter on this. And then I've got the dump and diff, again, linked below. So, what's it like to fly? Well, actually, it's really, really good fun. It is incredibly quiet. It's only a 1S with these little 3-inch props. And rather than some of the other smaller models that I've got in similar 3-inch sizes that sounds like angry hornets, this has a very kind of low, quiet tone to it. Hovering at about 50% throttle, it has a very gentle throttle response that is more like a 1S whoop than a standard 3-inch quad. That if you've tried one on a standard LiPo battery, a 3S or a 4S or something like that, this will feel very underpowered. And I got caught out initially because I was thinking that that's how it was going to fly. And you can't get out of trouble by just blipping the throttle, because the throttle kind of rolls on gently rather than gives you that instant performance. So you have to predict what's going on a little bit more if you're going to use the throttle to try and save yourself. You can't rely on that. So although you can get quite a head of speed up, this is definitely not a powerhouse. It's more of a cruiser. And it does seem to sip the power nicely as well. And there's a couple of little tweaks I'll talk about in a minute that they've done to make sure that all of this can be run off a single 18650 VTC6 battery. And with a 3000 mAh battery, you can definitely get over 15 minutes. I can easily get 10-12 minutes without stressing the battery at all. Camera performance, as you can see from that ant, is okay, but I'm getting a little bit of interference on my flights. But if you want better cameras and heavier cameras, then there's probably bigger quads that you can have a go with. There might be other options for the nano cameras to swap it out, but it's fine to FPV. It's just not the kind of stuff that you're going to impress your friends with. So there's an awful lot to like about this little thing. This is an engineering marvel. It's very small and lightweight for the size. It's fantastic. It's only weighing 111 grams with the battery. I love the idea of having a single 18650 for the power. The 18650 cells in particular have an awful lot of capacity for their weight, but they won't support really high currents. And that's why you need one of the high-end cells like the VTC6 in order to support the current that this little thing needs to fly. Really smart design, using the 18650 case as a structural part and using 3D printed things to keep the weight down. It is absolutely beautiful, really, really smart thing to look at and to play with. Again, time in the air is not bad at all. I think you can probably get closer to 20 minutes if you're flying gently, but the 15 minutes is the stuff on the website, and I can say that I'm pretty much easily getting that with the 3000 VT6 cell I'm using it with. As you saw in the flight video, you can actually get a reasonable head of speed up. It was a reasonably breezy day that footage came from, and it didn't seem to affect it as much as some of the smaller quads that I've played with, even though it's so light. Again, it's not a speed machine. If you want a speed machine, you've got the Rekon 5 and the Rekon 4. I think this is more of a gentle cruiser, and think of it more like a Whoop on steroids than a small quadcopter, like things like the Rekon 5 and the Rekon 4, and fly it like that and you'll have a lot of fun. If you're going to get one of these, there's only a handful of tips that I've kind of come across in the last couple of weeks of testing. First is add some tape around the 18650 to allow for easier and faster removal if you need to get that battery out. Just trying to get it out with your fingernail or whatever when it's depleted, or if you were having a problem or magic smoke was happening or whatever. It's so much easier to have that tag to pull on. I would also make sure that you're marking the positive and negative sides of both the battery and maybe even the side of the 18650 holder on the model, to make sure you don't get that the wrong way round. Getting it the wrong way round will make a mess of this. And the other thing I've done, which I've already talked about, put a bit of tape around that linear antenna at the back just to stop it getting in the way of the props. Unfortunately mine did, and it hasn't since I've done that little mod. Only a couple of things to note. This is the linear antenna, so you are going to need some kind of linear antenna and a linear patch on your goggles. I use the Menace RC stuff, and that's what I've been flying it with. Works very well, particularly for a model like this where trying to keep weight down and you're not really going to be doing lots of acro with this. It really doesn't have the power for that. No current meter on it. A little bit disappointed about that. The challenge with running it with 18650 batteries is that when the current's being pulled, because of the relatively higher resistance of an 18650 cell, and there's only one, the voltage gets pulled down. So it's hard to track how long you've got. I would probably just set the timer for this for about 12-15 minutes tops, and then fly it around and use the timer to tell you when it's time to land. It would have been amazing to have the current meter and a 3000 milliamp hour pack. I can set the warning for an appropriate level of milliamp hours and know when it's time to come home. No GPS on this, of course. Unlike the other Rekon quads, there's no GPS and there's no lost model finder. Not a surprise, because this is all about keeping the weight down. But that does mean that this, as an explorer, isn't as handy as ones with GPS, so there's no distance direction to home, there's no ability to use the GPS rescue feature, and if you're flying in an area that you don't know, you don't have that extra little help of the distance direction to arrow in your on-screen display to help you get back if you get kind of lost exploring the local area. The lack of a buzzer is a bit of a problem too. One of my little crashes, this was in the very early days of me flying it, I didn't put in enough throttle as I was turning around, and it landed in a very roughly ploughed field, and it took me a good 10 minutes to find this little thing. This is incredibly small, so the lack of beeper, just be aware of that. Don't fly it over anywhere where you don't have a good chance of getting it back if you do make a mistake. One of the things that HGLRC did get in touch with me about to check with this review unit was to check that the ESC startup power was set at the right level. By default on the ESCs it's set to 0.5, and I need to set it to 1.5. That's a much softer, gentler power setting for the ESCs, and that's to make sure that when you do ask for lots of throttle, it doesn't then try and suck all of that current out the battery and reboot your VTX. That would be bad. So that's one of the reasons, and one of the compromises, I guess, to make this thing able to fly, and to make sure that you don't get in a situation where with an aggressive throttle move you don't drop the voltage from that single 18650 cell down to the level that's going to cause you a problem. In summary, this is a little engineering marvel. Dave C is a very, very clever chap and a very talented designer. I'm sure there's going to be lots of other people will come out with different versions. I've already seen a couple in different places based on this kind of single 18650. Now, I really like quadcopters that can fly for longer than 3 or 4 minutes at a time. I particularly like quadcopters that are more endurance style. With the 350 milliwatts and the linear antenna and 15 minutes of flying time, you'll be able to get a pretty reasonable amount of flying in there, and if you're able to, a pretty reasonable amount of distance before you have to turn back and head for home. For me personally, I am a fan of the Rekon 5 and the Rekon 4 for that kind of exploring stuff. Particularly the Rekon 4 will work on lithium ion, and having things like the GPS on the back means that you do have that distance direction to home, you have the fail-safe options, and having a little buzzer on the back is also great. It means that when it does come down, it gives you an extra way to find the model. But I'm excited to see what Dave C comes up with next. He is really coming out with some really, really good models, and the collaboration with HGLRC to make the Rekon FPV brand is one that I'm going to be keeping a very, very close eye on. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.